In 1990, the Sayano-Shushenskaya hydroelectric power station reached its design capacity, and it became clear that a process of degradation had begun, which would inevitably lead to the destruction of the dam. Despite the most advanced calculations of that time, critical mistakes were made during the construction process. It turned out that neither the concrete nor the structure was designed to withstand a 200-meter column of water. Over the following years, attempts were made to reinforce the dam and seal the cracks, but practical results were achieved only by the Spanish company Rodeo, with the help of the latest polymer material, which had extensive experience in reinforcing similar dams around the world. It turns out that at this stage of civilization's development, scientists and builders proved to be incompetent in constructing large dams. Then let's take the Sayano-Shushenskaya hydroelectric power station as a benchmark for medium cyclopean structures that correspond to the level of our civilization. Height, 245 meters length along water pressure face, 600 meters, thickness at base, 110 meters at top, 25 meters. 10 million cubic meters of concrete. Anyone who has poured the foundation for their house or shed should be able to imagine this scale. Here is the dam on the Yanis River in Karelia, built in 1899 at the end of the 19th century. Unlike dams that are centuries old, here the water has worn through granite. Maybe it's because the water here is somehow special, flowing with some kind of abrasive, or maybe the water flow was calculated and directed incorrectly. This once again shows how difficult it is to calculate all these structures. Let's review the dams that are considered ancient. In Spain, 18 kilometers from Alicante, there is a dam called Tibi, which is also known as the Alicante Dam. According to history, construction began at the end of the century and lasted for 14 years. The dam is 42 meters high and up to 33 meters wide in some places. It is considered the oldest non-Roman hydraulic structure in Spain. The dam was built very skillfully. Not only is it an arch-gravity type dam according to modern classification, but it is also located in the river, at the point where the river crosses a high rocky ridge. The dam is anchored at its edges to the rocky banks, and the pressure of the water pushes it outward. The water spillway for reservoir overflow is very well designed. In the photograph, you can see it here on the left. The water flows down the stone ledges, dissipating its energy. It's well engineered to prevent erosion, and the builders didn't have to put much effort into this system. The overflow may be recent, as traces of water erosion on the rock are still visible after 400 years, which would be a positive sign. And before that, the water was drained through a channel that was carefully planned during construction. Here we can see that water outlets were made at the base of the dam, and this is how it worked. The water intake throat was located at the design mark on the slope of the reservoir. Water passed through it and exited at the foot of the dam through its body. On the other hand, it's hard to imagine the level of calculations and construction experience required for such dams. This was in the 16th century, with a level comparable to Soviet design institutes. But we built dams out of reinforced concrete, while here they used stone blocks, and the reliability of such a structure had to be even higher. Now this spillway is closed because it's risky to operate it after so many centuries. Imagine how many blocks had to be cut, transported and laid, and all of this in just 14 years. Even in the Soviet era, with all the available machinery, concrete dams weren't built in such a short time. What's amazing is that you can't see any water seeping through the body of the dam. Nowadays, it takes an entire institute years to build a dam like this. But what kind of institutes were working in the 16th century? And they also built star-shaped cities and other impossible structures all over the world. And this isn't the only ancient dam in Spain. Here is the next structure, the Pantano de Elche Dam. It has a curved hemispherical shape, is 22 meters high and 75 meters wide. It was built in the 17th century on the Vinalopó River between Mount Elche and Loma de Castellar. It is also of the arch-gravity type, which means calculations were made for its thickness, radius and height. Such structures are not built by eye. This once again emphasizes that in those times there were engineers who could calculate not only the design of a building, but also such a grand structure as a dam. This calculation was made with a safety margin. Water flows down from the dam and non-functioning spillways are visible on the right, similar to the situation at the Tibi Dam. Perhaps a decision was made to close them due to wear and the risk of dam failure, but nothing was done about it. It's better than letting the water overflow over the edge. It turned into a waterfall. And it's clear that it causes significant damage to the dam due to water erosion, and it can't go on like this for long. Eventually, this will lead to damage to the blocks and a cascading collapse during a flood. Local authorities should think about this. There are many examples of dam failures in history. Here is another ancient dam in Spain, Almanza. It is 25 meters high and it is still in operation. It has two body parts of different shapes. The lower part, with a curved floor plan and an arc with a radius of 26 meters, is a work of the 16th century, while the upper polygonal part appeared after an extension, possibly in the 18th century. Its crest length is 189 meters. In 2019, the dam barely held, even though all possible outlets for draining water from the reservoir were opened. According to the official history, the Sahara is several thousand years old, yet even there we find dams on ancient riverbeds. However, old maps from the Middle Ages show that in the not-so-distant historical past, the Sahara and Arabia were lands with full-flowing rivers and many cities. This is also confirmed by water erosion and traces of riverbeds. The entire northeastern part of Africa turns out to be in the deltas of ancient rivers and former lakes. The floodplains fill up during rare rains, but they are actually the beds of ancient rivers. On Google Maps, you can see objects like these on these dried up riverbeds. You can see that the dams are not very high and are sloped. Most likely, their purpose is to hold back water flows or mudslides after heavy rains. When were they built? If they were built in our time, then to protect which settlements? This is practically a lifeless area. Here is the main Aswan Dam, 53 meters high, built by the British. Here is the Marib Dam. Yemen serves to create a reservoir. It is an earth embankment with a road along the crests of the dam. Perhaps all the dams in the pictures above are the same, or they serve as protection against mud flows after heavy rains. However, here is a mystery. The photograph with the dams is a shot from the maps. These places without the dams are from the map service. It turns out that the dams appeared in the last few years. They continue to build them in our time, and after all, this requires enormous resources. Most likely the version that fits here is that even in the desert there are heavy downpours that lead to large powerful streams. These dams reduce the power of the streams, and they were built in our time. Or before that they were carefully hidden, and only recently did they not bother to cover them up. Once, some Russian-speaking American colleagues contacted me and told me that they were planning an expedition to the Sinai Peninsula because they had discovered numerous dams in the beds of ancient rivers. The ideal option would be to examine these dams on site and understand what they actually are. We couldn't come to an agreement. Maybe they went on this expedition, but I don't know about it anymore. I had to explore the Sinai Peninsula myself, and here's what I found right here at the tip of the Sinai Peninsula. This was a river. It flowed completely like this. So all of this was rivers, 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 rivers. All of them flowed together here, merging, merging, merging. So this was an absolutely water-rich region which has now turned into a desert. That's it. Here is a map from 1688, Frederick D. Witt. As we can see right here, there is no peninsula that has now formed here. But look, all in the cities, this whole peninsula is covered with rivers and lakes. Other maps show that this area is surrounded by greenery. On the modern map, it's a desert. There are no rivers, only remnants of rivers. Everything dried up over 200 years. Right now we're specifically interested in Sharm el-Sheikh. Here too we look at the number of cities, rivers and lakes. No deserts. So what's interesting about this Sharm el-Sheikh? It's located in the bed of an old river. Here's the riverbed, and right here houses are now built. One dam, two dams. As we go higher, we see another dam. This one's concrete. Now the concrete here is done properly, not like ours where it starts here, rises and then drops. No materials were spared. The reason was an existing channel here that allowed water to flow out this way. So it was blocked off here. As we go higher, there's another dam. This riverbed is from an ancient river, all covered with dams. Here, they raised the water, it stood here, and then there's another dam. We can see here that there's actually a huge reservoir blocked off. As we go up, there's another dam, which means there's another reservoir here. So basically all of this was cut through by water. All of this was vast expanses of water. If we go from here, for example, along the riverbed, along one of them, we'll be amazed at how much water used to flow here. Once, not so long ago, quite recently. Then we will travel tens, hundreds of kilometers, and from this point of view we will see a picture of what it was like in the recent past. For example, if we start moving up from Dorkaba, will we see the dam again? The length is about 250 meters. Here are the high voltage power lines, the dam again. All of this was filled with water. The dam again. So, the length of the dam is 250 meters. And this is about 500 meters. The length of the dam is 500 meters. The width is half a kilometer. Well, not bad. Here's the dam again. Here are also the remains of an even older dam. Apparently, from all this, one could draw far-reaching conclusions. First of all, that they knew how to build dams hundreds or maybe even thousands of years ago. At the same time, in many cases, they had far more resources at their disposal than our civilization can afford. It should also be taken into account that some of the dams under consideration could have been built in our time, and there is evidence that some are used during floods to hold back some of the water coming down from the mountains. This information simply escaped our attention. But to claim that all these dams were created in our time is extremely presumptuous. For rivers to carve such channels, starting from the mountain peaks, the water must have flowed in constant streams. Incredible forces, and all of this is confirmed by maps. Until the 18th century, indeed, this area was filled with rivers, lakes, greenery, and was densely populated by people. And probably it was no coincidence that God, Yahweh, had to land with noise, fire, and dust on the mountain, because otherwise he would have had to land in the jungle or right on people's heads, in some city, which clearly was not part of his plans. We still have it before our eyes. There is a very good example of how in the 1960s for several years Great Britain was building Stonehenge, and it required significant resources at the state level. But if you think about it, it's really just a couple dozen concrete blocks set upright and plastered, plus some landscaping, and voila, it's presented as the construction of the century. At the same time, each of the cyclopean structures we've looked at surpasses all these possibilities of building Stonehenge, both in complexity and in scale, by many, many times. Subtitles created by